Okay, folks, so we're moving into the topic called command line interface. And let's set some context and some groundwork here. So the context of a command line interface is in a long time ago, in a galaxy far, far away at AT&T Labs, folks were talking to computers, right? But they weren't talking to computers through menus and with mice, little trackpads and mouses. They were talking to computers through the command line interface. So CLI predates things like Windows, and it also predates the Mac OS by multiple decades. Okay, it's important to share that the first computers didn't have mice or mouses or mises or anything like that, or pressure sensitive pens or any of that stuff, right? Just commands to the command line, and then your command line application is going to turn those into commands to the computer. Okay, so a lot of folks are familiar with menus, right? File, edit, view, etc. So what you see is what you get with a graphical user interface. That's also called a GUI. Okay, so GUIs are things like a browser is a GUI, and anything with a menu, right? Anything with stuff that you click and stuff that you interface with and that shows you options is a graphical user interface. And you better believe that all your mobile apps and all this stuff are graphical interfaces too, right? So they show you things like icons, right? You see icons, menus, and you got to like right click stuff to see a more powerful menu of options. And the good side of graphical user interfaces as opposed to command line interface, the good side is easy adoption, right? You want a file, you click on the file. You want to do something with the file, you right click on the file, see what your options are. You can find all of your capabilities very easily. If it's in the menu, you can do the thing. The downside of GUIs and graphical interfaces are what you see is all you get. Okay, so really what we're going to be talking about in this lesson, our command line interface lesson, what we're doing is learning to talk to your computer. Tell it to do things. How to tell your computer what you need. Right. So we're talking about command line interface. The upside to command line interface as opposed to the graphical interface is the sky is the limit with respect to functionality. Right? If you want to talk to 1,000,000 computers you have access to and copy the same file to those 1,000,000 computers, command line will do that for you, lickety split, as long as you have the right credentials to those computers, right? The downside to command line interface is not terribly intuitive. It's not the most intuitive thing, right? When you see an icon that looks like a folder, you know it's a folder. When you see a file that the icon for the file looks like a PDF icon, you know it's a PDF. But with the command line, we have a lot of far-reaching functionality, automation opportunities, beyond which we have the capability or the time to go into. You could spend an entire career just learning and working on the command line, just like any one of our topics in the 100 lessons that we teach here in the data science program. Basically, if you say you know how to use a Mac, and if Linux is anywhere in there, I'm going to assume that you at least know how to move files and make folders and know where you are on the command line. Okay. And what I want to encourage us all to do is adopt using the command line interface for file and folder management tasks. The nice part is that anything you learn here on CLI transfers to Linux machines. And by extension, if you enable the Linux subsystem on a Microsoft box, then you can talk to Microsoft boxes with all these same commands, okay? So what the heck is going on with this terminal application, and what is it? I'll share all these notes with y'all. So when we pull up the terminal itself, when we pull up the terminal itself, to do that, I'm going to pull up Spotlight and type TER. And notice I don't have any other applications that start with TER, so I can just hit enter. And that's going to make my life a little bit easier, okay? So let's talk some vocabulary. Terminal is an application on your Mac. I think it's in the utilities folder. And your terminal talks to your shell. So terminal talks to the shell, and the shell executes commands on your computer. It may not mean a whole heck of a lot right now, but you see that there's an application called terminal. There are other applications that can do the same work as a terminal. What's really part of the operating system that's listening for you to type commands is the shell, and terminal is how we talk to the shell. So we see when you launch your terminal, you're either going to see a $sign or you're going to see a percent symbol. And here's what I want y'all to do. I want y'all to type echo $SHELL. And I'm going to make my font a little bit larger. I want everybody to do this. Echo your shell. Okay. So echo $shell. Mine says bash because I've configured my computer to use bash. Yours will either say bash or it's going to say ZSH. And if it says ZSH, that means that your prompt, the prompt is the part of your terminal that's waiting for you to give commands here. So if you see anything other than a $sign or a percent symbol, then you're not at your proper prompt. So Macintosh recently made a change and swapped the default shell from bash that they've used for decades to Z shell. Z shell and bash are functionally equivalent for y'all's usage, for our usage in class here. It's only going to make a difference a couple of times, like 2 times in the whole class. Okay. Some other things that we can write from the terminal. So echo is kind of like a print command. If you say echo hello, then we get the output of hello, don't we? So go ahead and do that. Type echo hello. Doesn't matter where you do it. And these are drills, and I want you to work through these drills too. Do them with me. So echo hello, echo $shell. Now, if you echoed shell without the $sign, we're not talking to a piece of the computer. We're just saying print the words, the characters SHELL. So that $sign earlier was important. Okay. One of the most important possible commands you could possibly learn on the terminal is to figure out where you currently are, and that's PWD. PWD. So I want you to type PWD. Anybody know what PWD is short for? Feel free to hop off mute and share that with the team here. PWD. Print working directory. That's correct. That's correct, Josh. Or Joshua. Do you prefer Joshua or Josh?
Either one is fine.
Either's good. Okay, cool. Yeah, so PWD is short for print your working directory. Now, this whole concept of a working directory is let's tie this in visually so that you have a concrete visual of what a working directory looks like. And when I open my Finder folder and I click on desktop right here, so I'm in my desktop on Finder. The Finder can only view one folder at a time per window, right? If we're moving things, we might need multiple windows up. But with Finder, your working directory is printed across the top of your screen. Now, this whole idea of a mouse and Windows, it goes back to the 70s, not the 60s or the 50s. Command line goes back to the 60s and the 50s, right? So PWD, always type PWD so you know where you are on your terminal. So I want to share something with you. Where I am right now, /users/plan9. What the heck is that? Well, your computer is going to say /users/your username. And what this, if you're in this specific folder, if your terminal is in some other folder, it'll give you another location, right? So I want to provide a little bit of guidance here. This users folder, we can open that up on Finder so we can provide some guidance here. See, I have a folder called Plan9 here, folder called Plan9 there. And I'm going to give you all a nice little shortcut for Finder in your graphical interface as well. I'm going to be, so my lessons are on command line, but my best guess is that we've got some folks new to Macintosh. So I want to share some Macintosh knowledge as well. So to go up a directory, I'm going to give you all a little command here. On your keyboard, you do Command up arrow on your keyboard. So that goes up a directory. And we see that I have a couple of users. I have a shared user, I have a guest user, and I have my own user right here. I'm going to check the chat here. Yes, Kevin, Plan9 from outer space. That is the best place with Plan9. And then let's see, we have a couple of questions. I saw Jess raising a hand, some other folks raising a hand.
I didn't see, how did you get from the command line window to making it, did you hit something to make it pull up Finder?
No, I did Command space and typed FIND.
Okay, I thought you clicked Plan9 in the command window. Okay, sorry. Thank you.
Actually, I did not do this, but if we were to say, hey computer, from the folder I'm currently on here, we could say open space period.
Okay.
And that will say, use the default Macintosh tool for opening this folder. Well, the default tool for folders is Finder. So Jess, your intuition is correct that there's a nice way of opening that up. So let's add that. Open period opens the current working directory in Finder visually. Yeah. Did I see any other hands up? Any other questions right now? Okay. Okay, so let's all do this. Let's go to your terminal and just type CD, just CD on its own. And if you do that, your current working directory should be your home directory. And you might see a tilde somewhere. So if you see a tilde, it means home directory is the main directory for your currently logged in user. Okay, so go to, just type CD on its lonesome. That takes you to your home directory if you were somewhere else. And then what I want you to do is type open space period to open up Finder in your home directory. And I want to talk about what the contents of this file system before we get much farther. Okay. My home directory and your home directory have different things inside of them, right? But I'd be willing to bet that all of you have a desktop folder, a documents folder, a downloads folder, movies, music, pictures, public, applications, and maybe a couple of other things. Yes? Okay, cool, 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 cool. So the first thing that I want us to do to make our learning terminal is very powerful, right? Very, very powerful, but I want to make sure that we all have some capacity, some extra capacity using Finder. And so let's see, we'll call them Finder commands. Do command key plus up arrow to go up one directory. I want everybody to do this command key. So open from your terminal, open period, that opens up your home directory. Then inside of Finder, we're going to do command plus the up arrow. Okay, and that is a go up a directory. If you're familiar with a Windows box, you'd have like a go up a directory icon, because Macs are Macs, they don't have a go up a directory icon. Don't know why. But your home directory is going to be the source of a lot of your work, right? If you were a graphics designer or somebody manipulating a lot of photos, you'd spend time in your photos folder. But we want to do work outside of documents and downloads. So we're going to be doing the lion's share of our work in your home directory. So do this part with me. When you see your current username, and you might have some other users in here, and if you go up all the way, command up all the way of your main hard drive, you'll see applications, library, systems, and folder users here. So click on your own user and drag your own username in between some elements on the left-hand side to make that a favorite. So I'll do that again. You click and drag. So it's like a click and hold operation, and drag that so it's in between applications or maybe above applications, something like that, and drop that. Okay, so now we pause and see if anybody needs a hand with that before we proceed. I need everybody to do this.
I'm confused on the command, like what you wrote on the terminal.
Right here?
Command key. So yeah, do we have to put the little minus? Like on 24, line 24.
Oh, yeah, Lindy, the command key with the up arrow. That's
Oh,
gonna happen.
okay, that what that was?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, okay, never mind, I understand then.
Okay, I'm glad you said something. The squeaky wheel gets the answer, right? So lean into that. Kudos for speaking up. Other questions right now?
So I could use a tip here. My Mac has this trackpad, and I struggle with dragging things across the screen. I can only drag things about an inch at a time. So how do I get around that?
Yeah, that's a great question, Josh. And I want to share this with everybody. Whether you use a mouse or a trackpad, the way to change those settings is underneath the system preferences. So go up to the nice little, and this is if you want to change your right click to literally the right click instead of 2-finger click as well, or you can change the trackpad speed. So go up to the Apple icon, then system preferences. And inside of here, if you've got a trackpad, click on trackpad. If you've got a mouse, click on mouse. And Josh, what you're going to be interested in here is the tracking speed. If you crank that up, your mouse will become faster, so it'll travel faster across the screen.
Okay, thank you.
And y'all may notice, or maybe you haven't noticed this yet on the Mac, right click, like physically a right click doesn't do a right click. Mac's default is to do they call it a secondary click, and the default is with 2 fingers at the same time, like they're doing in the little video down here. But I'll share, if that drives you bananas and you literally want to click the right hand side of your trackpad or the right hand side of your mouse, then you drop down and select click in bottom right corner, or wherever you need. Okay, then you can change some of your zoom actions. There's a bunch of other gestures that are attached to the trackpad. Really, I just want to make sure everybody's good with the pointing and the clicking so far, or we're going to have a bad time. Cool. So I want to do a checkup on everyone's progress. Did everybody get your home folder added to the left-hand side of your Finder and your favorites? Okay, cool. That is phenomenal. All right, so we end up using our home folder. You'll see this is where I keep all of my projects. I've got 101 exercises, my code up folder, some NLP work. Not going to show you my taxes, but I've got all kind of different code projects in here. And this is a safe place. Your home directory is the safe place to keep your code. We don't want to keep your code in downloads or desktop or your trash folder. We want to keep your code projects in your home directory. Okay. Cool. All right. Let's talk about taking a peek at what exists inside of a directory. So when I click on my home directory from Finder, it shows me documents, downloads, and it shows me all of my other projects here. On the terminal, the way to say, hey, terminal, show me some contents, that command is ls. ls, that's short for list. So ls, and that shows you, that's going to bring up all the files and folders that are in that current directory. So that command to show contents is ls. Visually, that's already happening inside of Finder for us, right? So what I'm going to do to try and tie these two things together visually, on my home directory, you don't need to do this with me, but I'm going to try to make a connection here. I'm going to make a folder called Kalpana. And it is on my, I made this in Finder. Now check this out. When I go to my terminal and I type ls and I look alphabetically, I see a folder called Kalpana because I just made it. We just changed the contents of our file system by adding a new empty folder, right? ls, if you're, we've got a couple of different ways of working with ls, and then we'll talk about moving files and getting into folders a little bit more after that. The ls command will default to your current folder. So if I'm currently in home and I type ls, you're going to see, and you run this on your computer, you'll see applications, you'll see documents, desktop downloads, pictures, videos, etc. And we can go a step further. So ls defaults to the current folder that it's in. You can also do an ls on desktop. And I'm going to zoom in on that. So ls space desktop, and that's going to show you the files that are on your desktop. So I've got a couple of screenshots and some pictures of bar plots on my desktop. Notice my current working directory never changed from home. I said, hey, ls, go and talk to the desktop folder. And I want to give you all a nice little shortcut. So typing on the terminal can be a harsh environment because we can't make any typos, right? So one way that I like to avoid typos is if I'm saying ls and I know I'm going to type into desktop, de, I don't have any other folder names or file names that have de after them, so I can hit tab. So if you've got the first couple of characters of a file name or a folder, you can hit tab and it'll do what's called tab autocomplete, and it auto-completes the rest. So notice how I typed capital D, E, tab, and that shows me desktop. If I just say LSD, capital D here, and I hit tab, nothing happens. But if I hit it twice, tab autocomplete shows me the options you have available. So because 3 different folders start with a capital D, the terminal doesn't know which one I'm talking about. So if I were to say, oh, tab twice, it gives me the options, oh, download or documents. So I could say, oh, let's do documents. So DOC tab, and you don't need to type the rest of that. Tab autocomplete will get you what you need. Okay. I'm going to put that in the notes real quick.
Quick question.
Yes, yes.
When I do ls space D and I hit tab, it just beeps at me. Like, is that because I have the ZSH and not the bash one?
No.
Oh, it's because I put lowercase. I'm sorry. I thought I read somewhere that lowercase and uppercase were not going to differentiate. Okay. Figured it out. Thank you.
Awesome, awesome. Good work, Jess. Yeah, so use.
I'm sorry, I have a question. What do you do whenever you do misspell? You know, and you press enter, because I did that earlier and I couldn't, I had to like exit out of it and restart it. I couldn't go back. I couldn't backspace, you know?
LS, and then when I say like desktop.
Yeah. Well, like, what if you misspell desktop and then, you know, press and then catch it until you press like return?
Oh, okay. So if I try to ls that big mess, no such file or directory, and then we are back to typing at the terminal.
When I did it earlier, it just, and I pressed enter and I noticed I misspelled it. It just put a question mark. I didn't know what to do there.
I'd have to see what you're talking about, Lindy.
Okay, all right. It's fine, I'll ask later if it comes up again.
I'm gonna introduce something shortly that might be related to what you were talking about, maybe. So let's talk about this thing, tab autocomplete. So terminal knows it's tough to type a bunch of stuff. And when I say terminal knows it, I mean the people who design the terminal interface know that. So if you're typing a folder or file name or some kind of path, and you already have the first unique characters, like first character, second character, however few it takes, hit tab and you'll experience autocomplete. And this is nice for when you have things you need to do and you don't need to fuss around typing. You lean into that autocomplete. And if there's multiple options, like under capital D, there was desktop, documents, and downloads. In this space, if you needed desktop, you would do DE, and then tab autocomplete finishes because there's no other duplicates of capital D, lowercase e. Okay, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Real quick.
Yeah.
So the notes say the Mac file system is not case sensitive. So I was playing, and I know if anyone else has ZSH, the system wasn't case sensitive. If I did documents with upper or lowercase d, it worked, but the autocomplete is case sensitive. If I did documents with a lower d, it got mad at me. If I did documents with an upper d, it auto-completed. So that's all.
Yeah, I'll echo that. Mac tries to make things not case sensitive, but some things are, because underneath the hood, Mac is running on Linux. So like when I type lowercase DESK, I got nothing, right? But if I finish that manually, it will do what I told it to. Isn't that weird? That's a little weird.
Yeah, that's what was tripping me up earlier.
It's because underneath the hood, the operating system that Mac built their operating system on is exceedingly case sensitive, ruthlessly case sensitive, and Mac developers for Apple overlaid some work to try and make it less case sensitive. So we end up with some artifacts like this. Cool. So let's talk about this ls command. I'm going to show you all what are called the manual pages. Why would the manual pages be called the man pages? It's not out of machismo. It is out of early developers needed to save every single keystroke because every single character is a byte of memory at the very least. So that's why we have list is shortened to ls, manual is shortened to man. And so when I say, hey, manual pages, show me the entry for ls, what we end up seeing is the manual entry for ls. So we get the name of the command at the top. We get all of the possible options. That's a whole lot of options, more than we have time to get into today. We do have some possibilities here. Let's see. -A is very, very common to show all files, even those with a dot in front, which would mean those are hidden files. H is very nice if you want a human readable file size. Instead of like the number of bytes in a file, you'll get kilobytes or megabytes, gigabytes, terabytes, petabytes, however large. That's really nice. So ls-a shows you all of the files, including hidden files. H flag shows you that human readable or human friendly instead of the number of bytes. -L is very common, the lowercase l, for listing all of the files in a nice list format. And we can combine these things together. So ls-a shows you all the hidden files as well as the non-hidden files. H, so -H. Now, I had a typo. I typed LA. That's not a command. So if you ever see a command not found, it's not that your computer has volition and is trying to be mean to you. It's probably that we have a little typo, right? So ls-a-h will list out everything and give us the file sizes as well. Okay, so yeah, let's see. These are called flags. All of these dashes are called flags. And what flags are, they are modifying a command in some way. We're providing extra information along with that command. So I'll give you an example of a flag that's a little more interesting than looking at the file system. What if I wanted to tell everybody hello?
Hello.
I could use the say command. This is built into the Mac. It's an accessibility function. Check this out. If I look at the manual pages for say, convert text to audible speech, and then we have a couple of options. I could specify a file that this should read. That's pretty cool. Instead of just telling it what I want to type, I could specify the specific file to read, which is kind of wild. It's tough to read an image, right? But if I had a text file, that would read the text file. We have a whole bunch of other options for sending the say command across the network. If you wanted to say hello to somebody else through an unsecure port, for example. We have a bunch of information on audio formats, right? So let me put that in our notes here. Useful things to know. And command name pulls up the manual page for that command name. So command name here is kind of a fill-in for any given command name, right?
Excuse me, Ryan.
Yes, yes. Go ahead. Hey, David.
Hi. So I actually just did that command, the manual ls list, and it did it. But now I'm having trouble getting back into like the usable terminal.
Yes, perfect. So like you can cycle through stuff. I'm surprised, gold star David for saying something. I wouldn't be surprised if some other people ran that and ran into the problem as well. What we're looking at is paginated results, right? The results are too large to fit on one screen. So do you see the colon at the bottom? Right down here. It's actually waiting for us to issue more commands if we need to. And even if we scroll to the end, we're still not out. Q, the letter Q for quit will get you out of that. So anytime you see something from the terminal that's paginated like this, and if you can't get out of it, rather than closing your terminal window, hit the letter Q. And I'll put that in our notes here.
Awesome. Thank you.
Hit the letter Q. Cool. I'll be capturing this stuff as we go. So let's see. This is in Kalpana. So I'm going to save my notes as CLI notes.md. So I just saved a text file, didn't I? And where did I save it? I saved it in a folder called Kalpana. So when I go to Kalpana here and I do LSLHA, I see that I now have CLI notes edited mere moments ago. It's 1.5 kilobytes. And so this Kalpana folder isn't just some crazy folder that is made up. I mean, it's kind of made up. I just created it. But if I open up Finder, go to my own user account here and find Kalpana, there's the work that I just did. I'm going to walk you through some more of these commands. What I want y'all to do, let's move into the exercises for listing files. I want y'all to read through this lesson if you haven't already and get after these exercises here. So not a lot of synthesis just yet, but try each of the flags. There's a lot of them, but at least use the ones in the curriculum. What do you notice as you swap those flags out? Combine 2 or more flags together. Now, these flags are always going to be separated by a space, and between the flag and its own letter, there's no space. So hang on to this pattern. It's going to help you in the future. Okay. List out some contents of other directories. And sometimes your exercises will be prompts to ask you, what do you think will happen? Okay, so we'll work through those. And then after working through these exercises, then we'll start talking about file paths. We'll get back into things here. And I'll share my screen and we'll get going. Okay. So far, we've been listing files, and if you're in your home directory, you can list files from that home directory, or you can list files from subfolders from that directory with relative ease by typing ls and then the name of that folder, right? Like ls desktop, shows you your desktop. Let me make sure I'm not, okay, cool. So notice that when we did ls desktop, I didn't have to feed in the entire location of the desktop folder because desktop itself is a subfolder of the home directory, that root, the tilde or bacon strip, however you want to call that. So let me establish, I want to make a distinction here. We have the idea on the terminal of something called a relative path and an absolute path. So we're going to say file and folder paths and add some notes in here. And this is all mirroring what's written in the curriculum. Okay. So when you type pwd, you get back the full file path to where you are. And not just full, but the full and absolute file path. So here's what I mean by that. when I say PWD, this gives us back something called an absolute path. And I want to make a distinction between an absolute path and a relative path. So an absolute path is, think of like, if I asked you directions to the CodeUp physical campus in San Antonio, the equivalent of the absolute path would be the latitude and the longitude, or the street address. So from anywhere you are, if you have an absolute path, you can navigate to that space based on the absolute path. You can plug in the street address and get exactly the turn-by-turn directions. Now, when we do something like, when I say, hey, LS, show me the contents for my Kalpana folder, what's going on here is I'm not pasting in /users/plan9/Kalpana, right? So relative to where I currently am in the users folder, or in my home directory here, Kalpana is a subdirectory. So I don't need to pass in that full path. So here's what I mean. The full path of Kalpana would be /users/plan9/Kalpana. And PWD gives us that absolute path. But relative to my folder called Plan 9, Kalpana is a subdirectory. So that's relative. So relative paths are it's kind of like saying across the street and down 2 blocks. You can say across the street and down 2 blocks to anybody. Where they end up is a function of where they started, yeah? And that's what's different about an absolute path versus a relative path. So I'll say the absolute path is the full and complete file path to a folder or file. And where an absolute path starts with the root, the /, right? This is the / on a Linux box is kind of like the C:\/ on a Microsoft box, right? So we're saying /users / your username / some folder. Starts with
Question.
Yeah, go ahead.
How do you exit subdirectories on the terminal? Like, so I'm just stuck in desktop now.
Yeah. Okay, cool. I think that was Daniel, right?
Yep.
Well, we could do the following. We could, the answer to your question is either we could type CD on its own, and that takes us back to the home directory. And that's a nice to have. Notice we're not providing any specific folder name, but I'll repeat it again, CD just on its own takes you to the home directory. What it's doing underneath the hood is saying CD tilde, and tilde and the home directory are the same thing. So let me go back into my Kalpana folder, and I'm going to answer your question a little bit differently this time, Daniel. So Daniel's question was, how do I get out of a folder? And my answer was, well, you can go to your home directory. Another shortcut we could do here, so is the command CD. It's short for change directories. CD is the command to change directories. And when we're talking about a relative path versus an absolute path, so relative paths are relative to where you currently are. And where you currently are is PWD, right? So if my PWD is Kalpana, if I want to go up one folder, I could say CD space ... CD space ... And ... is command line ease for up a folder from where we currently are. Now, this is the textbook definition of relative path, because relative to where I currently am, I'm saying go up one folder, as opposed to absolute. Absolute would be like something much more specific, like change directories into users, Plan 9, my CodeUp folder, and then maybe the data science folder, and then maybe some other stuff like the data science curriculum. So this is an absolute path because it's starting at forward slash, going somewhere, going somewhere, going somewhere, going somewhere, going somewhere, right? Where relative would be relative to where I currently am, go up a directory. Or we could say relative to where I am, go into, so I did my tab autocomplete. I have the Kalpana folder for y'all. I also have a Keras intro for a deep learning library workshop. So I could change directories into Keras intro. You see LS has its own files and folders in there. And I'm like, whoops, wait, I'm in the wrong place. I got to go up a folder, cd ... That takes me back home. And if I did cd ... a second time, let's try this out. If I did cd ... from where I currently am, what folder would this put me in relative to where I currently am?
Users?
It put me in the users folder, which isn't very exciting. This is where other users of your computer have accounts. And if we go up one more directory, we're to the root. The forward slash is the root. Now you're not going to do anything in the root. All of our work is going to be in the home folder. But so I could do one of two things. I could say CD and just take me back to that home folder. Notice how the forward slash of the root turned into the tilde, meaning home. And the tilde is always relative. So Daniel's tilde is Daniel's username. Lindy's is Lindy's username. David's is David's username on that computer for tilde. And this is really, really powerful because we could all run a similar command like say I wanted to make a new folder called examples. Now, mkdir is short for make a directory. Tilde is always saying your home directory. And so this is pretty cool. If you run this code on your computer, you make an examples folder in your username. If I run this on my computer, I make a folder in my username folder. Okay. So in this way, the tilde is kind of relative, right? The tilde, short for your home directory, whatever your currently logged in user, whatever your currently logged in user is.
Question?
Yeah, go ahead.
For CD and tilde, is that something that was pre-programmed into it, like it knows what users logged in, or can you change what folder CD and tilde actually take you to?
You don't want to undo that default.
Okay.
So I'll share that it's a default.
Okay, it's default.
So let's see. Let me make sure I'm not running off too far off the beaten path here. Okay. So I've introduced a couple of extra commands here. I've introduced cd ... and that goes up a directory from your current working directory. What if you wanted to go up two folders? You would do cd ... and then a slash and then another ... This goes up two folders from your currently working directory. And if you're 17 folders deep and you want to go up 17 folders, then it's ... slash ... slash ... slash ... slash ... slash ... etc. And this ... stuff is really a perfect example of a relative path, because relative to wherever you currently are, let's say my current working directory is the data science curriculum. Okay, so y'all don't have this. Like, you have the access to this in a browser, but this isn't a folder on your system. So we see when I do PWD, I'm in my home, then I'm in my code up folder, I'm in my data science folder, and I'm in the data science curriculum, right? So if I wanted to go up one directory, I could. And if I go up one more directory, that takes me to the code up folder, and I can run ls and see what else is in here, right? I've got some handouts and some other notes and some cool stuff in there. So this idea of a relative or an absolute path is pretty powerful. You can do a lot with an absolute path, but the challenge is that you've got to type everything perfectly. But relative to the code up folder, I have a folder called data science. Could I say /user/plan9/code up/ds/data science curriculum? Could I do this? Will this take me to where I want to go? The answer is yes, it will. But that's a lot of typing, right? That's a lot of typing. So we could say from home, I could say, take me into code up, then DS, then data science. And notice how in the second example, where I issue this command from is important. If I issue this command from tilde, it works, right? I'm gonna go up a directory and show you, actually go back to home and show you what doesn't work. So this relative command, we know this works, but if I'm in the Kalpana folder and I run that command, we're gonna get code up is not found. And that's because if there's nothing in front of the folder name or the file name, the path is going to try to default into a relative path. So it says, relative to where I currently am, the Kalpana folder, do I have a folder in here called code up? No. So that's why there's no file or directory. Okay, so we want you to lean into the error message, read the error message, think and consider what could be causing that error message. And in this case, I could totally fix this path with one thing. If I say, go into home directory and then code up. tilde/. So tilde is short for home. And there I am. I'm in the right place. So relative paths are relative to wherever you currently are. Absolute paths will work from anywhere on your computer. And something that we'll do a lot of on the terminal is copy a file from one folder into another folder. Pretty straightforward stuff. And a lot of times we will rely on the relative path to do that, right? We'll talk about, these file paths right now, all that I'm sharing with you is CD and LS with these paths, but we can use our relative and absolute paths to do other work, like make folders or create files or move things. Okay. Before I start doing any new or newer material, I want to open up for questions or comments at this spot, at this place.
Hey, Ryan, I just had a quick sort of question, a little bit off topic, but is the absolute and relative paths, is that applicable to like web addresses too? Like that sort of framework when we think about going to a web address and then /, would that be considered like a relative path?
With a web address, you always have the full path of the URL here, but you might see, like if we were talking about a URL, if we were talking about this URL, we might say relative to the file path, CLI is up one folder, fundamentals are up one folder. I can't make you the promise that that's how every website works underneath the hood, but if the website is replicating folders to the URL, that's what's happening. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
I have a question. So the absolute path only work for the CD, or does it work for like other kind of stuff? If I type like LS, does it gonna show up all the things in the absolute path?
Happy to answer your question, Chen. The answer is the absolute and the relative paths. We can mix and match those, and they will work with any command that takes a path. So I haven't given you very many commands that accept a path so far. CD, right? CD accepts a path. LS accepts a path too. So if I say LS / if I just say LS Kalpana, that shows me what's in my Kalpana folder. But we could do other things here, right? What if I wanted to say, let me make an example. Here's a great example of why I wanted y'all to install the VS Code and get all of that going nice and early. I'm going to purposefully make a file in my home directory. And by purposefully, I mean, I'm going to purposefully put it in the wrong place so that I can make an option to move that file to Kalpana. And to do this, we will use a combination of paths. So I'm going to type code here, and code on its own launches VS Code. But if you give this a file name right here in the terminal, I'm going to say code, and I will say example.txt. So all I'm doing is on my home directory, I'm creating a file called example.txt. Okay, there's nothing in here. And so I'm going to say, hello, Kalpana. Nothing too complicated. VS Code, notice it's trying to look out for me. It's trying to tell me, hey, bud, you saved this into your home directory, right? So when I close this, I say ls, and I look through here, I have a folder. I'm sorry, a file called example.txt here. So I'm going to introduce y'all to a command called move. MV is the command for move, and the general pattern, the kind of abstract pattern for move is MV source and then destination, and source could be relative or absolute, and so can the destination. Now, I don't have a folder called source. I don't have a folder called a destination. So key in with me, really tune in. If I want to move that file called example, I could say move /users /plan9 /example into /users /plan9 /Kalpana. What kind of path am I using for the source, the first argument? What kind of path is that?
Absolute.
Absolute, absolutely. And then the second path is also absolute, yeah? You know it's absolute because there's a / at the beginning. So it does my bidding if that file is where I said it was. Now, if I try and move the file a second time, I get file not found. Why would I get file not found here? Any takers?
Because it's already moved already.
Because it's moved already, absolutely. So you can't move a file twice because the first time it moved, it just moved. The second time, it could not move because it was not where I told the file system it was in that absolute path. So here's an example. Here is another example. A couple of y'all mentioned this in the setup earlier. Hey, Ryan, hey, Ravinder, my setup, I ran the command, nothing happened. Notice nothing happens when the terminal does what you tell it to, but something does happen when it's not able to follow your bidding, right? We got an error on the second attempt, but on the first attempt, it just moved that file underneath the hood. The reason why a terminal is built like this is because over time, the more you're doing with the terminal, the less you need that feedback that tells you you did the right thing, right? And that gets in the way. If we were doing massive automation, the little pop-ups that said you moved it successfully, like little Clippy coming in and saying, looks like you're trying to move a file, that would get really annoying if you're like automating 1,000 files, right? So a lot of the design of the terminal is assuming that you know what you're doing, which is kind of the downside to the terminal, right? It can have a little steeper of a learning curve. Let me give y'all another example. So we no longer have example inside of my home directory. Walk me through, I'm going to open up the floor, walk me through what I would type in order to move example from Kalpana to my home directory. And I'm going to give y'all the caveat using only relative paths. Only relative paths. Do I have any takers?
can you write PWD so I can see where we're starting from? Okay, thanks.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, you're trying to move something, so you do MV, right?
Correct. Move. And our pattern is source, space, destination. So my source is,
So it'd be the / Kalpana, because that's where it is now. And you said relative, so the destination would be ISCD double dot, and I'll put it back in plan 9, because it would move up one directory.
okay. So something like that.
No, you need CD in there, right? Or no?
No, I don't need to change directories. Move is going to do all the directory talking itself. And I want to talk about this command because this is going to bomb out. Actually, this is not going to bomb out. This is going to do something unintentional. It's going to, actually it will bomb out. Yeah, it totally bombed out. So here's how to read this. You're only going to have a prepended / when you're using absolute paths. And if you're using absolute paths on a Mac, it'll be /users/username. So I do have a folder called Kalpana, right? I do ls, excuse me, when I do ls on Kalpana, notice I'm using the relative path here. There's nothing in front of Kalpana. So Kalpana is a subfolder of my home directory. So again, let's say my goal is to move example.txt from Kalpana back to Bacon Strip, back to home. I'll give y'all one more shot and then I'll go through it if y'all need a hand.
You said it was, sorry, Brian, just to clarify, you said it was path and then source. Is that right? When moving files?
Move space source, and then your source could be a relative or absolute path. And then your destination could be a relative or an absolute path.
So you do /.
Just be example.txt.
So example.txt lives inside of a folder called Kalpana, but I don't have example.txt inside of my home. Let me see if I can make this visual for us here. Visuals usually help. So I have a folder. So when I go to home directory, I do have a folder called Kalpana. Inside of there's example.txt. Here's the graphical way of moving that to your home directory. You grab example.txt and move it back to your home directory. Right? Now I did not finish that command, but here I might be prompting y'all to stretch a little bit too much. So let's walk through this. So if I'm able to say ls Kalpana from where I currently am, that means Kalpana is a subfolder. So we could also do this. I could say open Kalpana example.txt, and that'll open example.txt in my text editor. So this is a relative to where I currently am, Kalpana folder example.txt. So if I wanted to move that file, I would say move Kalpana / example.txt. And then after the space, I can say wherever on the computer I want to move this file. So we could say Bacon Strip, move it to the home directory. And it will do exactly that. Oh my God, nothing happened on the terminal. But when I do ls, I see example.txt right there.
So what would be the usage for doing absolute versus relative?
I need you to talk computer, and to talk computer, you need to talk both relative and absolute paths, Daniel, is the answer. If the question is like, show me on a project where you need to do this, like if you're moving things around, you should be able to do this. Yeah, it's pretty, I mean, it's fundamental foundational material.
Yeah, I get that. I'd just, if there was like a certain use case.
Getting stuff to where you want it to be. I hate to be flippant with my answer, but like, it's moving files around is so fundamental that there's a million specific concrete answers. Does that help?
Yeah.
I realize I'm moving this file around, but something will happen pretty soon where, let's say you're in some project, like, I don't know, you're in the data science curriculum or a project of your own use, and we need to get a copy of this README somewhere else. I would say, so copy works kind of like move, takes CP, and I could say copy the README to the home directory or a specific Python script. Does that help a little bit?
Yeah, well, I was more just asking, like, is there a reason to use absolute to move versus a relative path?
Oh, if you provide the absolute path, it'll do your bidding. If you provide the relative path, it will do your bidding. So that it's like a Phillips and a flathead screwdriver.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you for clarifying the question. Most of the time, you're going to use relative paths because you got to have an idea of where you are on your computer, right? Absolute paths are nice, but relative paths are much more common. So it's kind of like, latitude, longitude gets you to the grocery store, but it's a lot easier for me to say 2 blocks this way, 3 blocks that way.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. And we'll probably use relative paths 9 times out of 10. That being said, these now I just created a file. That being said, what is relative changes when you change your directory, right? So that's the most important thing I need everybody to really wrap your head around is as soon as you change a directory, your relative path changes. Relative to where you currently are changes because your location changes. So the nice part about absolute is it works like latitude, longitude, or a street address. You won't go wrong. But relative is a bit more common. Say renaming a file is moving it to the same folder with a different name. So I'll give you an example of renaming a file. I moved down readme.md to my home directory, should be at the very bottom there, readme.md. If I wanted to rename this file, readme.md, what we do is mv readme.md, and then we give it some new file like z-readme.md. I named it z-readme.md just to show you at the very bottom right here. That command was move. And in this case, I relied on the relative path for both because they're already in the folder I'm talking to, right? And if I wanted to nuke that file, I could say rm, and that would remove that file, and it's gone.
I have a question. So like if you decide you want to undo something, like how do you undo something? Like you accidentally remove the file and then how do you restore it back?
Yeah, that's a great question. Was that Meredith?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah, so I just deleted this file called readme. It's gone. It did not go to my trash. Now, I don't know what's in my trash, but readme is not in there. This readme from some other project from the 26th is in there, but not that one file. So I want to advise caution with your terminal, Because if you tell your terminal to remove a file or to delete a folder, it will do it. And you don't have the little nice guardrails of your operating system trying to keep you safe. Because command line is built kind of like it's built with a bunch of razor blades. In that razor blades are very precise and exacting, but they can do harm too, right? So in this case, I removed a file that I just copied, right? So I can go back to that original folder and recopy it. But short answer, Meredith, there's not really an undo. There's not a Control Z on the terminal.
Okay, so like anything you do here, you have to make sure you're doing it right.
You got to make sure you're doing it right. Yep.
Okay, right, that
Yep.
makes sense.
So as almost a habit that I want to encourage y'all to adopt is, if you're going to remove stuff, pull up Finder. Go ahead and pull up Finder to remove files and folders and things like that. Because the undo for a folder is much simpler, right? If I come in here and I say, hey, this is a Kalpana folder, I'm going to move to trash. Your trash is actually not the trash. It's actually just a plain old folder that's called trash. So I see that I have Kalpana in here, and notice it's gone. I don't have a Kalpana folder anymore. See, we have that Keras intro under K. We see some other stuff in there, but I don't see Kalpana. So if you're going to delete stuff, my advice is, until you are 1000% comfortable on the terminal, just delete stuff using Finder, because then you can right click and do a put back, which is very nice, right? And then it's back where it should be. Okay.
I do got a question. What would happen if you use to copy a file that's has the same name as another file in its destination? What would happen?
Oh, that's a good question. Jared, let's check it out. Let's go into my Kalpana folder and let's try that. I'm going to try copying CLI notes to CLI notes. So that's the same name. We get an error that says they're identical because it's in the same place. So relative to the current folder, I'm talking about the same file. So we get a little error there. Okay. So in a folder, we can't have duplicate names, is the punchline. Yep. Cool. Well, I'm going to check in with the curriculum real quick. We talked about relative paths, the root, absolute versus relative. We even got into navigating the file system a bit. PWD is your new best friend. I realize that it's one more step on the terminal, but PWD will always give you the absolute path of where you currently are. That helps you get your head around what your folder system or where you are, right? We talked about CD to change directories, and CD could use either a relative or an absolute path. We talked about LS as well. We talked about 2 dots. So we talked about 2 dots, but not 1 dot. So I'll go back and do that. Okay, cool. Then we'll get into these exercises right before lunch. All right. So if I were to say, if I'm in my Kalpana folder here and I want to say move from the folder above, oh, this is perfect. Now, remember we had that example.txt in the home folder? The ... from Kalpana is saying go up a folder from where I currently am and grab example.txt. And the way of saying this here folder that I am currently in, this here folder is with a period. So we said relative to where I currently am, go up a directory, grab the example.txt file, and then move it right here where I currently am. That's what dot means. So if you ever do cd dot, you stay in the same folder, don't you? Because dot is command line for this specific folder. Now, that's not the most, it's not terribly crystal clear how a programmatic way of saying this here folder is very, very useful, but it will help us over and over throughout the course and the rest of your career. As long as you're touching command line, it'll be very, very helpful. So dot means here. So if we were to say CD dot, that takes us to where we currently are. If I said ls dot, that would be the exact same thing as saying ls. Kind of redundant right now, but the part where this was helpful was I could move a file and tell it to go to where I currently am. So I could reach out across the computer to other folders and bring things to where I currently am. Right? Let me see. We did CD, we did dot, we did dot dot, multiple dot dot slashes. Perfect. Excellent. We're about 5 minutes out from lunch. So what I want us to do is before lunch here, we'll start in on the exercises from navigating the file system. Okay, and this should take us through lunch. Start in your home directory, double check your current working directory, change directories at your desktop, CD around until you've run out of directories, and then start moving your way back up.